Hello again. I'm going to be doing some service work to this Bronco today, and I'm going to be pulling the front cover off the engine, and that's actually going to be in the next video. What I wanted to go over on this video is a pretty cool tool called an Airlift. And the purpose of this tool is to put a vacuum on the cooling system. Shops, we use this to speed up the time that it takes to perform a service where we had to remove coolant from the vehicle, and it works great for that. But in this case, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to remove as much coolant from the engine as I can get so that the coolant doesn't run down in the oil pan when I pull the front cover off the engine. So I don't want to destroy 5 quarts of oil, and that's why I'm going to try and pull it out with this. I've done this before. It's a little clunky when there's still coolant left in the block, but it does work. It just takes more time. So anyway, I'll set it up real quick and show you how this works. So there's an adapter, there's several adapters actually. To fit different radiator necks. That's for like a really tiny one. But for this one, we can use the standard cone. I'm just going to stick that in there. This one's for adding coolant back to the system. Once you can pull the system down in a vacuum, you can actually stick this in a jug of fresh coolant and open the valve, and the vacuum in the engine will pull the coolant into the engine. And because there's no air in the engine when you do that, there's no air to purge when you're done. That's why we use these shops, because you don't have to sit there with the engine running and burp the cooling system like you would normally do. So it's a huge time saver, especially on vehicles that have convoluted cooling systems to start with, like certain Nissans, certain Jeeps, where the hoses are routed in such a way that it's really hard to burp them. This is a fabulous time saver in that instance, and can save you a lot of time. It can also save overheating an engine, because I've seen guys not get all the air out, and they release the vehicle to the customer. Customer overheats the vehicle and has to be towed back in. So it does happen, but this tool, you eliminate that completely. But I'll go over that in just a second. We're not doing that right now, but I'll show you the procedure that you would use. But for now, what I'm trying to do, I've already drained the radiator, but obviously there's still coolant in the block. And if I pull the front cover off with coolant in the block, the coolant runs down in the oil pan and destroys the oil, and I have to replace 5 quarts of oil. So hopefully I can avoid that by doing this. But very simple procedure. We're going to hook an air hose right here. I'm going to open this valve. It's going to pull a vacuum on the cooling system. As it's pulling a vacuum on the cooling system, whatever's in there is going to come out this hose. So I'm going to be sticking this hose in some sort of a bucket and try and catch as much as I can. You'll notice that it'll come out of the cooling system as sort of a mist, which is not really the ideal situation, but that's just what happens when there's coolant left over in the block. There's no way around it. But it is a way to evacuate a block when you're doing service like this. So I'm going to set this up. So I'm just going to zip tie this hose over here, because the air does come out of it with a certain amount of force, and I don't want it to blow out of the bucket. And the cheap yellow tie actually worked, I don't believe it. All right, now we need air. You do need a pretty good air compressor to do this. It needs to have a pretty good feet per minute, cubic foot per minute rating, or it's just simply not going to work. This one's 15 cubic feet per minute, I think. It's a 2-stage, so it should be able to handle it. See, it does pull a vacuum on the cooling system. We'll just let that go for a little while. You'll notice the hoses will go flat. Now, if I were going to refill this cooling system, what I would do is, well, first I'm going to leave this thing sit here just the way that it is for a while and make sure that this vacuum gauge doesn't lose vacuum. And that will tell me if there's any leaks in the system at all. It's a good way to spot leaks by doing this. You just pull in a vacuum, walk away for a little bit, and if the gauge slowly drops to zero, then you know there's a leak somewhere and you better address that before you add coolant. But this one I know is not leaking, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this hose off. And I'll grab the fill hose. This is what you would do if you were going to refill the system. Now, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to show you the process. So we have two ball valves here. What I'm going to do is just stick the end of the hose back down in the coolant. And I'm going to open this ball valve, and then I'm going to slowly open this one. You can see it start to draw coolant. You can see it coming up right here. See that? So I would just open that up and let the system refill full of coolant. There's no air in the system right now. So wherever there is vacuum, the coolant would fill, and you would essentially be done. But I'm not doing that. I'm going to get ready and pull the front cover off this engine. So let me get this out of the way. And I can continue on with what I'm doing today. But that's essentially an airlift. Very useful tool. Big time saver. Almost a must if you have some sort of a vehicle that has a really convoluted, tricky cooling system that's hard to burp. And newer cars, there's a lot of those out there nowadays, so it's a pretty cheap purchase. I can't remember what I paid for it, but it wasn't much. And big time saver. You don't have to sit there. You can literally, when you're done doing a service, you can literally start the thing up and drive away. You don't have to sit there and burp it at all. So I get done using this and refilling with coolant. I can jump in it, start it, go for a drive, come back, just double check my coolant level, and I'm done. So big time saver. Hey, thanks for watching.